This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Sue Herrera.
Split personality, the NASDAQ drops while blue chips pop, as investors wonder whether now's the time to lock in their gains or let them ride. New prescription? CVS buys Aetna and lays out an ambitious agenda that could reshape the entire healthcare industry. And place your bets. The Supreme Court hears a landmark case that could open up more of the country to sports betting, potentially generating billions. Those stories and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Monday, December 4th. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Tyler Matheson. Sue Herrera has the evening off. Well, the best way to describe today's market mood? Moody. Yeah, the Dow closed at yet another record, but the euphoria of the morning that saw the blue chip index soar more than 300 points following the weekend passage of the Senate's tax cut bill, well, that euphoria was mostly gone by the closing bell. There's a sense that investors are trying to figure out which sectors will benefit and which won't from that tax legislation. And that could be why the tech-heavy NASDAQ was lower for most of the day. Here are the numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 58 points to 24,290. NASDAQ was off 72, more than 1%. And the S&P 500, up for much of the day, was down almost 3%. Despite today's mixed finish, the market rally this year has really been impressive. So what should investors do next? Mike Santoli takes a look.
It's the time of year and that moment in a bull market when investors are asking whether to lock in some gains or let them ride. The S&P 500 is up 18% this year and almost 90% the past 5 years. The index is on an 8-month win streak and has only risen in 9 straight months once since 1980. Stocks have now begun pricing in the expected windfall from a big corporate tax cut, and the economic news has been unusually good for months. The strong 2017 rally has also left many investors' portfolios tilted more heavily towards stocks than they planned. So is it time to trim back on equities or bet the market can deliver further rewards in December and beyond? Well, December has a well-earned reputation for generosity. In years that most resemble 2017 in terms of performance through November, December has produced further gains of around 2% on average. And December has never once been the weakest month of any year, which is encouraging given that the worst month of 2017 was March, when the market was down less than 0.1%. Still, for 2018, it probably makes sense to expect a less smooth ride for stocks, even if the bull market carries higher still. The tax cut will produce relative winners and losers among industries and companies, and the effect of a tax cut in an already humming economy could have unintended effects on interest rates and inflation that might restrain any boost to growth. If the market does grow choppy in coming weeks and months, there's a bright side for investors looking to stay in stocks. After such a long, calm rally as we've had this year, the first sharp pullback is rarely the start of a severe or lasting downturn. At least, that's what the market history books tell us. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Mike Santoli at the New York Stock Exchange.
CVS has agreed to buy Aetna for about $69 billion, bringing together two major healthcare players in the biggest deal of this year. Reports of a possible acquisition first surfaced way back in October. Today, shares of both stocks were lower. The combined company is widely expected to transform an industry that touches all of our lives one way or another. Bertha Coombs explains.
CVS and Aetna's CEOs say they've tried to offer consumers better deals on prescriptions through their business partnership, but now together they'll be able to offer even more value.
It's really the perfect time to bring these two companies together to create a new healthcare platform that can be easier to use and less expensive for consumers and really create a new front door to healthcare in our country.
The firms say that so-called front door would open up more seamless care, so employers and consumers won't have to navigate as much paperwork for prescriptions and medical care, and clinics in CVS's 9,700 pharmacies would become a place for basic preventive care and help coordinate benefits and prescriptions.
They can ask for some help, get guided through the system. We can make the insurance the back room of the operation. We can waive prior authorizations. We can waive co-pays as people use the system in a way that's more effective, so we can reduce costs.
United Health has gained market share with large employers by offering an all-in-one medical and pharmacy plan at better prices, With Anthem developing its own pharmacy benefit unit, one benefit consultant says the trend could mean that employers could soon have little choice beyond all-in-one plans.
You're going to have a couple of big entities that have significant power. And in certain market segments, they may start to make it very difficult to carve out pharmacy.
It could save them money, but with CVS and Aetna, employers and consumers will also want to know whether the clinics will mean more limited networks.
Is care that was potentially going to the physician's office now diverted to the storefront? But it's certainly a question that I have as to how this would all pan out as it moves forward.
CVS is hoping that the deal will be approved in the first half of 2018, but tells analysts that building out that new front door healthcare model could take longer than the first year to really take off. Bertha Coombs, Nightly Business Report.
Craig Garthwaite joins us now to discuss what the deal could mean for people like you. He's a health economist and assistant professor of strategy at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. Craig, good to have you back on the program. Have we just seen a glimpse of the future?
I think we are. I think the moves we're seeing here by CVS and Aetna, and as you mentioned, by Anthem dropping their PBM and starting to form their own pharmacy benefit management program, really are signs of a re-coordination of the healthcare system. Right, where now we're going to have a different set of firms that have different assets and activities that they can do to compete in the new marketplace.
What will it mean for consumers?
For consumers immediately, it's not going to mean a lot. I think this is going to be something that's going to develop over time. But the hope we have is that we can offer a better coordinated medical and pharmacy benefit so that we can think about how your prescription drugs affect whether you go to the doctor. We can make it easier for you to actually get access to a provider. Those are the types of things we would see when we join together a company like CVS and Aetna, or that we are seeing with what United is doing with its Optum division, which is also buying up some providers and some urgent care facilities to provide a similar type of service to customers.
So what I see, tell me if I'm wrong here, is insurers and providers getting together so that more of the revenue, so there are cost efficiencies, and so that more of the revenue stays within the ecosystem that they create. In other words, if I buy my insurance through CVS Aetna, that plan is going to favor me going to CVS's Minute Clinic and favor me, I'm going to get my drugs at a cheaper price there than if I go, quote, out of that ecosystem. Is that how it's going to work?
I think we're seeing elements of that, and I think that's part of what we might expect in a world if we're moving to sort of value-based care or outcome-based coverage. So whatever you want to describe the new world in the healthcare we're moving towards, it's going to require investments by insurers and by providers to try and get us to really attempt to be purchasing health as opposed to be purchasing healthcare services. And there's a lot of worry that by each side of that transaction, that if they're the one that makes the investment, they might not be the one that gets all the benefit. It might flow, say the provider makes an investment, but the insurer is the one that benefits. And so because of that, we might get a more optimal sort of set of activities if one firm is doing both services.
Quick thought here, is there any antitrust or Department of Justice or Federal Trade Commission hurdle that could be an impediment to getting this deal done?
I certainly think we're going to see some review of this. It is a vertical merger, so it's not like the Anthem Cigna and the Aetna Humana mergers.
Right.
That being said, I've given you sort of the positive, right? We'll get this more coordinated care. It's also going to make it even harder for new firms to enter the insurance market. And so this coordinated care might lead to lower costs. The only way that benefits the consumer, though, is if we have insurers competing so that their premiums come down and then the consumer can benefit. And so we still need a vital and competitive insurance market for this to work. And really it's just going to be a trade-off between the benefits that we get from potentially coordinating your care with the concerns we have that we don't have a competitive enough insurance market.
All right, Craig, always good to have you with us. Craig Garthwaite with Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. Well, as we reported, the Dow moved higher today on the passage of the Senate's tax bill this past weekend. And now the Senate and the House must reconcile their two versions and hammer out any differences. Elon Mui is on the story in Washington tonight.
A sprint to the finish for tax reform, Republicans are now focused on resolving the key differences between the House and the Senate bills. The three biggest: individual rates. The House has 4, while the Senate has 7, and those expire after 2025. Also, the corporate rate. The House cuts it to 20% right away, and the Senate waits until 2019. The Senate also repeals the individual mandate. The House doesn't do that, and it's still unclear how moderates feel about that approach. There are also a bunch of smaller issues that could wind up becoming bigger battles. The Senate keeps the alternative minimum tax for both corporations and for individuals. It also doesn't repeal the estate tax, and there are different rates for pass-through businesses and for repatriation. Now, Republicans say their bills have similar architecture, and their differences are not insurmountable. However, President Trump threw a wild card into these negotiations by opening the door to a higher corporate tax rate of 22% in the final legislation. Now, a 20% rate had been one of his red lines, and conservatives are still saying they're committed to that number. The next step in this? A conference committee. The House will vote on members today, and the Senate should follow suit soon. Most of this process will happen behind the scenes, and Republicans will likely need right up until December 22nd to get this to the president's desk before Christmas. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Ilan Mui in Washington.
Well, one of the big questions is whether tax cuts will increase overall economic growth and by how much. There's new analysis tonight from a leading group of economists, and Steve Leisman has that part of the story.
Business economists estimating the impact of the tax cut on overall growth and are finding positive but modest effects. And there's a significant debate as to how long-lasting those effects will be. Economists at the National Association for Business Economics on average see a 0.2% kicker to GDP for 2018. At Goldman Sachs, they see it at 0.3% for 2018 and 19, but they see it as temporary. John Riding at RDQ also sees a 0.3% impact, but he thinks it's going to be more permanent. Supporters of the tax cut plan think it will increase capital spending that could boost worker productivity, boost worker wages and jobs. They also like the idea that it could cause trillions of repatriated foreign cash to come back from overseas, and it will reduce inefficiencies in the economy. Those who don't support the plan are worried about increased deficits, see the Federal Reserve having to tighten policy more than it otherwise would. They're concerned it would raise inequality as many of the benefits flow to the wealthiest Americans, and they're skeptical on the job and wage effects. John Riding at RDQ writes, quote, "The drop in the corporate tax rate would make the U.S. look competitive relative to overseas." Riding sees a permanent upward shift to potential growth. But Goldman says after growth increases in 2018 and 2019, quote, "We note that the effect in 2020 and beyond looks minimal and could actually be slightly negative." One of the big concerns has been about the $1 to $1.5 trillion in deficits the bill could generate and whether it means higher interest rates. Rates have been on the rise as the chance for the bill's passage has increased, and the market now sees multiple rate hikes next year as more likely from the Federal Reserve. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Steve Leisman.
Still ahead, a business battle is brewing over the scaling back of some national monuments. The U.S. Supreme Court is considering whether to legalize sports betting nationwide, and if that happens, it could mean billions of dollars for states well beyond Nevada. Hampton Pearson rolls the dice in Washington tonight.
It's not just tailgating that gets sports fans fired up. It's estimated Americans illegally bet $150 billion a year on professional and amateur sports, according to gaming industry analysts. At the Supreme Court today, the justices appeared ready to overturn a 25-year-old federal law that bars all but 4 states from legalizing gambling on most professional and amateur sports. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie spent the last 5 years and millions of state tax dollars fighting to uphold a New Jersey law that would allow sports betting at racetracks and casinos in the Garden State.
New Jersey wants to appropriately regulate sports gaming, and here's why. We want to do it because 65% of the people of the state of New Jersey voted that they want to do it. And we already have a long experience of over 40 years of casino gaming in our state where we've shown that we can very appropriately regulate.
During the hour-long oral argument, conservative and moderate justices questioned if the 1992 Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act violated states' rights. Justice Anthony Kennedy said it appeared the federal government was trying to force New Jersey to keep a wagering ban in place that no longer exists under state law. Conservative justices Neil Gorsuch and Samuel Alito said the federal government erred by trying to use state governments to carry out federal policy. If New Jersey wins and the law is overturned, more than 30 states are waiting in the wings with legislation to legalize sports betting. A potential revenue windfall for the states and a new revenue stream for the gaming industry.
15 of those states have already introduced legislation that would put them in a position to regulate sports betting. Heck, Pennsylvania just passed a law within the past couple of weeks that has their regulatory parameters for sports betting, including an absurd 36% tax rate. So we've still got some work to do on that front. But the states are lining up. The states are right behind New Jersey. New Jersey is extremely well positioned.
The justices do have options. Throwing out the entire law would open the floodgates for sports betting in the states. But keeping part of that law would limit some of the sports gambling operations going forward. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Hampton Pearson at the Supreme Court.
Today, President Trump announced plans to dramatically reduce two national monuments in Utah. Grand Staircase Escalante, created by President Clinton in 1996, and Bears Ears, created by President Obama in 2016. President Trump called it an important move for states' rights and the people of Utah. But as Kayla Tausche tells us, the move has created a battle between businesses.
Grand Staircase Escalante spans nearly 2 million acres in southeastern Utah. It's been a national monument since 1996. Since then, the surrounding area's population has grown by 13%. Service sector jobs surged 42%. New businesses like Canyon Country Lodge, which opened in September, are springing up to meet the demand.
We've seen an increase in economic vitality.
Suzanne Catlett heads the region's Chamber of Commerce and also runs a drive-through restaurant. She worries the president's decision to pare back the protected federal land puts that at risk.
We have revenue growth every year that every business wants. You know, anywhere from 3 to 25% growth every year for our businesses. Why would you take that growth cycle and then jump onto maybe a decline cycle like coal?
It's not just Utah. In addition to cutting Grand Staircase Escalante in half, Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke endorsed shrinking at least 6 monuments, from mountains in Maine to a reef in the Pacific Ocean. The administration's goal? Removing restrictions for fishing, mining, ranching, timber logging, and cattle grazing. Ethan Lane represents the National Cattlemen's Beef Association.
At Escalante alone, we've seen, by the most conservative estimates, more than a 30% decline in grazing activity since the creation of that monument. And a lot of that, is because there wasn't enough proper analysis before these monuments are created.
NCBA interviewed local ranchers like Sandy Johnson, who says less federal land would make room for more year-round business.
Tourism just don't do it, and it'd hurt San Juan County bad if this stays in a monument.
While the business battle lines are clear, it's now up to Congress to draw new boundaries for the monuments. Utah's lawmakers support the move. It's 2 senators joining President Trump during his speech at the state capitol Monday.
Some people think that the natural resources of Utah should be controlled by a small handful of very distant bureaucrats located in Washington. And guess what? They're wrong.
Environmental groups could move to challenge the decision. Catlett hopes Trump will rethink it.
It is bad for business. You're asking us to give up a lot for very uncertain little in return.
The White House says Grand Staircase and Bears Ears should be reopened for new business within 60 days. But that timeline could be obscured by an already packed agenda on Capitol Hill and a potential legal battle over this decision. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Kayla Tausche, Washington.
It looks like Disney is taking another run at 21st Century Fox, and that is where we begin tonight's market focus. Several reports say Disney has restarted talks to buy most of Fox. The talks reportedly still remain focused on Fox's movie and TV studios as well as its international assets. Fox News and its broadcast and sports networks are not expected to be part of any transaction. Word of the talks between the two companies came out last month. Then other suitors emerged, including CNBC parent Comcast, which the Wall Street Journal says is still in the mix. Shares of Disney up nearly 5% today to 110.22. Fox up almost 3% to 33.09. Comcast rose 5% to 40.32. The drug maker AstraZeneca said the United Kingdom's exit from the European Union could cost the company more than $35 million a year in extra taxes. The company also said that without a new tariff deal with the EU, AstraZeneca could face delays which could hurt its ability to conduct clinical trials in the UK. Shares fell 2% to $32.17. And Broadcom won't take Qualcomm's no for an answer. After the world's largest maker of smartphone chips rejected Broadcom's $105 billion takeover offer, Broadcom today nominated nearly a dozen directors to Qualcomm's board. The move ratchets up the pressure on Qualcomm, and Qualcomm shareholders are said to want the company to engage in sales talks. The ones who are, they will get a chance to vote on the new directors in March. It's been reported that Broadcom is considering sweetening its bid. Shares of both of the chips were down, both of them. Broadcom off 3%, 263.61. Qualcomm off 1.5% at 64.56. Well, the online used car retailer Carvana raised $100 million through a private placement sale of 100,000 preferred shares. The company says it'll use the money to drive growth, including expanding its products to more customers across the country. Carvana shares jumped almost 13% to 2021. Well, with a major tax overhaul looking more and more likely, now may be the time to rethink your charitable donations. That's because proposed changes may make it a little harder for some to deduct the value of their gifts. Joining us now with the details is Sharon Epperson. So how does this tax plan impact charitable giving?
Well, one of the ways is when you look at the standard deduction and what's proposed in the tax law changes to nearly double the standard deduction to about $12,000. That means a lot more people may choose to take the standard deduction in the future years. And if you don't itemize, you cannot claim a charitable contribution. So if you are planning to still itemize, but you want to take a bigger one, you want to make sure that your charitable deduction really counts and gives you a big tax break, then it may be best to kind of front load and put a little bit more toward charitable giving this year. Since it's so uncertain about what exactly is going to happen with the tax
But they
changes.
haven't taken away the ability to deduct your charitable gifts. They've just proposed raising the standard deduction, which makes fewer people
itemize. Exactly.
So what are the current tax breaks and what can people do to take advantage of them so long as they're here?
And we should say, of course, this is not the reason why you give. To just get the tax break. But generally speaking, if you give a cash contribution, you can take up to 50% of your adjusted gross income. So that deduction up to that amount is pretty significant. And so a lot of people still want to do it. Majority of people give that way. And the way they do it, they need to make sure that they're tracking their donations. That's a very key component when you're doing this, to make sure that you can get that tax break. Make sure that you save your receipts. Anything over $250, you have to explain and document what that exactly is for. And then you want to make sure that the charity that you're giving to is a 501c3, that it is a tax-exempt organization that is eligible to receive tax-deductible charitable contributions.
And in some cases where you make a donation, or an expenditure, part of the expenditure may be deductible and part may not be. So there are scammers out there who are not really legitimately charities. How can you tell? How can you avoid getting scammed?
Well, you want to look at a couple of different resources. You want to look at the Better Business Bureau. You want to look at an organization like GuideStar or Charity Navigator that really vet charities. Of course, checking with the IRS website about whether or not it's tax exempt is also a good thing to do. And then to Google, find out, have there been any articles about this company in terms of scandals or in terms of the good deeds that they've done, and make sure that you really believe in the charity that you're giving to.
Sharon, great to see you. We have to leave it there.
Sure.
Thanks very much, Sharon Epperson. All right, coming up, switching gears, when you think of SUVs, you probably think of Ford, Honda, GM, Toyota. How about a Lamborghini? And finally tonight, Lamborghini getting into the ultra-luxury SUV race. The Italian automaker, known for very expensive cars, plans to double its sales by selling a very expensive SUV. Phil LeBeau has more.
This is the Lamborghini Urus, the Italian automaker's first SUV, going on sale next year. Lamborghini calls it a super sports utility vehicle. It's also super expensive. Base price, $200,000. For that, Lamborghini is promising an SUV with Lamborghini performance wrapped in the finest materials. But will anybody really pay $200,000 for an SUV? You bet. When Mercedes rolled out the G-Class, it found plenty of buyers willing to pay big bucks for an SUV. Since then, Bentley has started selling the Bentayga, and other ultra-luxury automakers like Rolls-Royce have extremely high-priced SUVs in the works. Global sales of these ultimate utility vehicles have tripled since 2010. Even Ferrari is looking to build one. Where are these super-rich SUVs being sold? In the same places where ultra-luxury cars are popular, including Southern California, China, and increasingly, the Middle East. Phil LeBeau, Nightly Business Report, Chicago.
Wow. All right, that's Nightly Business Report for tonight. I'm Tyler Matheson. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great evening, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow.